Hello, Coffee and Convo listeners. I hope this finds you well. It's your host, Liz Bullard. And if you're new to the Convos, welcome and thanks for tuning in. Coffee and Convos is the podcast where I talk with my friends, leaders in the community, business owners, and others who are just great at having conversation. And we talk about issues that are happening locally and issues that are happening globally. And we discuss what's happening and how it might be affecting us here in the state of Connecticut, specifically Waterbury, Connecticut. And over these next couple of convos, I'm going to be on this journey of, I'll say, self-exploration. I've had so many thoughts and questions as a result of racial inequality, especially following what has happened with George Floyd, and some of the comments and things that I've seen posted on social media, some of the responses to things like All Lives Matter, Black Lives Matter, everything involved with that. And so I had all these questions based on discussions that I've gotten into or discussions I've seen. And so over these next couple of combos, I'm going to kind of be addressing it from a personal standpoint, as a way of exploring these larger global issues. And so this particular episode, I'm joined by my friend Margaret, and she helps me kind of figure out, am I a racist? And getting in many of these conversations, which often turn heated, that's kind of the thing that gets thrown around, is that someone is a racist for disagreeing, or they're a racist for bringing up certain things, or for maybe having a certain pride in their ethnic group. So we kind of discuss many of those things this episode. And so I hope that you gain a little insight into what's going on around the world, but also help explore yourself and some of the biases that you might have, because I think we all have biases, and that doesn't mean that we are a racist or that we're wrong or that we're bad. But I think that in exploring our own development, it helps us just be better humans. And so I hope that's what you get out of this episode. And again, thank you for tuning in. Thank you for liking Coffee and Combos on Facebook and Instagram. Continue to be safe and to be well. And stay tuned for the episode right after this sponsored segment. Hi, Coffee and Combo listeners. Here's just a quick ad before we get started. So go and check out and download the free Anchor app, or go to anchor.fm if you've ever thought about starting your own podcast. With Anchor, it's completely free to use all the tools. There is no subscription required. So you can create your own podcast from start to finish using the app or website. You also get access to different tools like adding background music when you create your podcast with Anchor. Anchor distributes your podcast with just one click of a button. Your podcast will be available on Spotify, Apple, and many more sites. The bonus with Anchor compared to other podcasting sites is you can make money from your podcast with no minimum listenership. So if you're interested in podcasting, or you have an existing podcast, download the Anchor app or go to anchor.fm to start using the app and creating your ads and creating your podcast. So as always, thanks for listening, and please like, share, and find Coffee and Combos on Instagram and Facebook. Hey, okay, perfect. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Awesome. And so before we get into it, so it's this is literally just one of our many conversations. So feel free to ask me questions and stuff. It's not like a Q&A.
Okay, cool.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Welcome to Coffee and Combos. How are you?
I'm doing well. How are you?
You know what? I'm better that I'm talking to you. I feel
good.
up and down moments of this ride. Like we always talk about 2020's roller coaster.
Literally a mess. Yeah.
Yeah.
And you've been in a lot of So I know that that's been pretty stressful for you.
Yeah. So like it's just like every moment is a different, it's like stages of grief. Like there's acceptance, there's anger, there's like okay, then there's like bargaining. There's all of it. Like it's all going on.
Yeah. And I think that I know in the past we talked about like re-traumatization too.
Oh God,
I
yeah.
feel is happening over and over and over again. But that's a different topic.
Girl, listen, I'm gonna have you and a couple others come back and talk about that because it like that's real. That's real. But
Mhm.
before we put the cart in front of the horse, welcome to Coffee and Convos. So I like to start all our convos with a coffee related question. And I know you're a coffee drinker.
Yes.
Um, what's like your perfect cup?
Ooh, okay. So I had a friend who worked at Starbucks back during my internship, and she told me to get this coffee. She gave me the full, list of what to get, and
Yeah.
it is well, I get it from Starbucks. It was a caramel macchiato, hot with soy milk,
Ooh.
and it is literally the best thing ever. Um, it's just so good. You can't mess it up. So that is my soy milk for whatever reason makes the whole drink taste completely different and in a good way.
You know what? Like I feel that you would be a soy milk person. Like I feel like you I don't know, like you know what, like you're not like regular milk, right? You're like
No, I've been trying to like experiment with different milks. We
yeah.
have Rebel Dog not too far from us, which they're like a phenomenal
Mm,
coffee company.
mm.
And so like I've been trying like oat milk, hemp milk, almond milk, like any kind of milk. They don't have soy, which is a bummer. But hey, it is what it is.
That's like you're a type of person. Like you're just like open to anything and everyone.
Oh
And
yeah, absolutely.
yeah, and that's why I really wanted you to participate in this conversation. So for those of you listening, let me back up just a little bit. I didn't even introduce you. I just kind of got into it. And like that's how all our conversations are. Like we just kind of like pick up no matter how long it's been. Like we just kind of like pick up and go.
Mm-hmm.
But for those of you listening, Margaret, I like we only have known each other what 2 years.
Oh, yeah, I think no, a little bit longer. It's been a year since I came back from Texas. So yeah, maybe around 2 years.
But I feel like we have known each other so long. Like you just so get it. Like you're just one of those people that's like, wow, like you just get it.
And I'm blushing. Thanks.
So for this conversation, I thought it was very appropriate because we've had conversations about race. And
Hmm.
so for this conversation, we're going to dabble into so what I want to answer by the end of this is, am I a racist, Margaret? I just want to know, am I a racist? Because I have been called a racist um, for having black pride, for being liberal. So like I just want to know, like, is this the new standard of 2020? Like just help me. Like I didn't know like having black pride and wanting equality was being racist. I didn't know calling people out for like their thoughts that are wrong or racist was making me a racist. So by the end of this, I
Mm,
hope me understand why.
yeah, 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 that's a whole conversation.
So we're gonna dabble into it, but you know, again, for those listening, Margaret, we were started off as coworkers, and you know, we're really good friends, and we have these conversations. And I think one reason, at least in my opinion, that we're able to have these conversations is you look at it from the point of view of kind of like being Polish versus I feel
Hmm.
like Americans. I feel like Americans do this thing where like if you say anything negative or like, hey, like we need to improve, it's like, what do you mean we need to improve? This is America. We are perfect. There's
Right,
needs to change. And I feel like other cultures, other races were just like, oh, like we could change this. We'll be all right. You know what I mean?
right. And I tend to look at it, I don't try to be one-sided. So
Yes.
my background is social work, so I'm trying to always see what and how are people seeing things, and why are they seeing it that way? Is it related to, is it just related to their skin color? Is it related to their traditions, the way that they grew up? Is it related to their culture? Is it related to the pride that they have? And so there's a lot of different factors that I think people don't take into consideration, or aren't open-minded enough to kind of look at what or why a person is feeling a certain way. Not to say that everyone's correct and calling, people racists and stuff, because mm. but, but there's, even for myself, and I know Liz and you and I have had this conversation. For me, at the beginning of all this, was really hard trying to figure out where I sat and where I fit, because I had all these different views and didn't know exactly where my thought process was, and it was a journey.
Mm-hmm.
And now I know where I am, and I kind of explained to you before we got into this podcast what was important to me and what I really don't care for.
Mm.
So whereas some people might find certain things a lot more important and impeding. So yeah.
And I think that's a good place to start it, because you touched upon a lot of things. And I think that um, these conversations require vulnerability and openness.
Mhm.
And there's some things that, people are not going to agree on. And
Right.
but I think that if we can all, and not even agree to disagree, just agree to hear each other, like, and be like,
Mhm.
I understand your point of view. I understand why you feel that way. I think that's when growth can happen, because I feel like we're past an understanding point. We just need growth.
Right. Right.
Mm-hmm. And in talking about this concept of racism and things, I know one thing that is often a theme is people being silent or not posting about race or anything that's going on, and people saying silence is equal to violence, or your silence is racism. And I understand that point of view, because for me, and we've kind of talked about this, in the beginning, I'm like, yo, like, why? I need someone to speak up. Like, why are you not saying anything? Why are you not saying anything? Because it was
Mhm.
just like you had all this hate speech or this rhetoric about definitive, like, Black Lives Matters movement is wrong, this is division, this is this or this. And like seeing people that was in politics, or seeing friends not say anything, was just kind of like, well, where do you stand? So can you talk a little bit about what you said about it being a journey before you spoke out?
Yeah, absolutely. So for me, taking it back to when this whole George Floyd thing happened, when the Black Lives Matter really blew up, um, I felt stuck and confused.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a social worker. I know what I should believe in.
Mm-hmm.
I know what I should agree with. I usually don't have any troubles with making up my mind, or, you know, not feeling confused and whatnot. And for me, this is probably one of the hardest things. And it took a lot of soul searching.
Mm-hmm.
Not because like I'm not racist.
Mm-hmm.
I have a certain, I don't even want to say certain beliefs. Like I feel like people should be treated equally. I feel like people, cops should be accountable for their actions no matter what race they are. Like if they're black, white, Asian, who cares? Like
Mm-hmm.
cops should be held accountable if something negative happens. That's the way it should be, and no one should be treated differently based
Mm-hmm.
on their skin color. Now, for me, at the beginning, I had some real struggles because, the media puts forth the looting and the rioting, and I'm sitting there like, I don't like I don't agree with it, and I don't know why I didn't.
Mm-hmm.
And that took me a while. It took me several nights talking to my boyfriend. Like it kept me up at night because I was like, why is this something that's confusing me so much? Why can't I just be like, yeah, I understand.
Mm-hmm.
Um and Liz, I know I've talked with you about this too, and what it came down to was, after really discussing it, I can understand why people are angry. I can understand, why people would act out in the way they would. But for me and the way that I run myself and my morals, I don't get angry. I would never be able to get angry enough to loot or riot.
Hmm.
But above all, like in my body and myself, I would never be able to do something that I know would have a negative impact on someone else, to the point where if I were to burn down their business, yeah, they may or may not have insurance, but the thing is, you're having an impact on that person, on their family, on their friends. And again, I can see that side where, yeah, George Floyd doesn't, he can't come back.
Mm.
And I understand that. But for me, and again, it's something that I know I personally wouldn't be able to do because it would have a lasting impact on someone else. Not to dismiss his death. Um,
No, and I don't think that's what you're saying either, but I think what
right.
is like so real because I think that in
Yeah.
that moment it went from a very just black and white world, a really like right and wrong, to we saw so much gray. And like you
Yeah.
we entered a world of like I understand why you're angry and why you need to demonstrate your expression that way, but then we also went into like everyone expressing their grief, their passion differently. Like some people
Exactly.
tested, some people were talking about policy, some people were just being a support to those who were going through it. And so I think, but I think the key thing is you had this understanding and you
Mm.
look inside of yourself to say, what is this triggering within me? And that pushed you to a place of growth. And I think that's what we need to see. And I feel
Right.
like in looking at a lot of people's comments and things, we're seeing a lot of people just digging into their heels about what they say is right or what they feel is right without hearing
Hmm.
right. And I think,
Right.
yeah, mm-hmm,
And it puts you in a position because even though you want to educate someone,
mm-hmm,
it's like a wall. You really can't, nothing that you say to them, nothing that you can only hope that you make some impact, whether that it's an understanding. They don't have to fully agree, but just understand where someone's coming from. Or like, and again, you don't have to agree, but
mm-hmm,
being open-minded enough to see that there are more than one paths that someone can take or feel about a certain topic.
mm-hmm.
Like, and I know for you, girl, I've been watching all of these conversations that you've been getting into on Facebook, and I feel bad because like I've been there, I've been watching you, but girl, I haven't said a single thing. And the thing is, I am so bad with confrontation because it raises my anxiety to such a high level that I can't do it for my own mental health.
Listen, Mark, I just need you to be on the sidelines and be like, girl, just like that was too
Yes,
much.
and that's what I do. I am
Y'all,
that
Mark is not
support on the
right now
sideline.
on the deep end because sometimes I just be trying to educate people. Okay, I just
Yeah.
try, and that's the whole reason for these combos is to
Hmm.
educate people, and then sometimes it just goes left.
Well, and that's the thing is you do a really good job at educating. You keep it to the facts. You keep it, sometimes you get it personally attacked, and hey, you fight back the best you can, and you do good. But the thing is there are people who will outright call you racist for just being educated and having, understanding, and trying to push you down for whatever reason. It doesn't make them look any better. And, it's so ugly. It really, that's what it comes down to, is like people are just ugly. They're stuck in their ways. Racism is, there's so many sides to it. And I have never felt like you're racist. Like, even though they must have called you racist like at least 15, 16 times. No. Clearly you don't know what the meaning of racism is.
Listen, I haven't
Um,
called one person a Karen through this whole thing. Only one person. That's the only thing I've said negative.
can I just tell you, total sidetrack. I had a Karen experience this week.
Oh, girl.
Um, I was within 6 feet of a woman, and she turned to me, looked at me, yelled at me, and said, "You need to be 8 feet apart. That is the CDC guidelines that you need." And I literally, I was more than 6 feet away, and she was angry at me because I stuck my hand out to like the side, like diagonal a little to grab like a tea sample, which it didn't even have any tea in it. So I can't. But anyways, that was
2020
my Karen moment.
crazy. 2020 has turned people crazy. Like
It
even the
has.
comments, like so like I stay in these comments just reading the comments because I'm just like, oh, like this is how people really been feeling all this time. Like I thought we decided that saying some of these things I'm reading is hate speech. But people are
Mhm.
so openly saying things, and I'm just like, and you know, like some people, oh, well, just block them. I can't because some of these people are the people that are running for office. Some of these people are in your grocery store. Some of these people
Mhm.
are your mail. And I'm like, no, like I want to know. You tell me all what you got to say. You know?
Yeah. Yeah. And like,
Yeah.
and you know what? And it kind of bothers me too. Like you and I actually just spoke about this before our conversation, the whole statue, the in Waterbury where the Christopher Columbus, they decapitated him. And that individual that you had that conversation with, where he was like, "Oh, you think that's funny,
Mm-hmm.
X, Y, Z,
Mm-hmm.
because of a comment that you made," which, like the way that you wrote, if it were any other situation, someone else would have been making that comment.
You
If
know?
it were during this Black Lives Matter, this whole,
Yes.
destroying of anyone would have made that comment. And for them to be like, "Oh, well, that means you're racist." No, sir, you would have made that comment yourself.
If
Just
it if
because someone else said
it
it
was Austin
first, and
head,
because you,
we would all be laughing.
yeah, I mean, come on. And it's a statue. It is, yes, I understand there's history behind it. And yes, I know people are very behind their history and would like to keep history alive, and this kind of comes back to what I really care. I don't even want to say care for, but like what I find is important.
Mm-hmm.
So like the statues, not that important to me, I really don't care, and that's just my opinion. That's
And
not something that I'm
not to
focused
cut you
on.
off. So what's happening here in Waterbury is there's this Christopher Columbus statue, and
Hmm.
for many of you, you've seen statues across the world coming down that have the symbolism of racism, and hate and slavery. So there has been this divide in Waterbury with the statue, and on the 4th of July, we wake up to the news that Christopher Columbus has lost his head. And there is now even more of this racial tension and this divide. And now there has been this tension regarding the statue and getting justice. And then you have people on the other side saying, wow, we want justice for a statue, but what about all the other injustices and racial divide? And so now there's like this tension and this rhetoric of you're racist because you're not caring about the statue, and you're racist because you don't care as much about the statue as you do other things. And so that's what we
Hmm.
are referencing when we mention the Christopher Columbus statue here in town.
Yeah. And like again, for me, I really I don't really care. That's not my main focus. That's not my main focus. I like push it to the side. The
Mm-hmm.
looting and rioting, the thing that had kept me up for nights, I took that and I pushed it to the side because that's not my main focus either. My
Mm-hmm.
main focus is understanding and seeing what is going to be done to bring justice for those who have been wronged, for those cops who have not been held accountable. It's just, it's that's what I find is important. And I'm so sorry. I see a call coming in from my mom. I'm gonna do this. But that's, kind of throughout this journey, that's what I've had to do is I've had to break it down and see what do I find is the most important thing so that I can have conversations about that. Um,
I
and so
think that's
that
so
I can
realistic.
educate people on that as well because a lot of people are not educated. And I've had
Mm.
conversations with quite a few people now, and surprisingly, they've gone kind of well just to get their idea and their side, but also, I'm finding that there's a lot of other factors that are coming into play that I wasn't even thinking about,
Care to
uh,
share what those other factors?
and whatnot. And Liz, I have not talked to you about this,
Mm.
and I don't know if you want me to bring it up.
Why not? Let's go for it.
Okay. But so one of the conversations I had recently with an a friend of someone is this conversation about presidency
Mm-hmm.
and women and women of color,
Mm-hmm.
and talking about, how Biden may or may not want a woman vice president. And the person had said point blank, the United States is not ready for a person of color woman president. And I said, well, why not? I was like that. I was like, really? Okay. And she started out with just saying, a woman. And I said, well, I don't understand why not. And she's like, because they're not. I said, well, why not? Because they're not. I said, but give me a real answer because you're not giving me much of anything. I'm like, from the women that I know, from women that I've worked with, I they're more apt to get things done.
Listen, women will have a fallout, but still get the job done. Like they're like, "Oh, we
Yes.
got a war going on. Okay, let me push this beef to the side, and like we'll just get it
Hmm.
done."
And like it's so sad to see that even women have this like terrible misconception of women and even people of color, or women of color. It's just it,
Yeah.
it just shows how much work we still have left to be done on educating and like, knowing. I mean, sheer acceptance first off. You might have your own stigma of women, which I think is interesting because you're a woman yourself.
Mm.
I've heard that women can be emotional, that they do X, Y, Z, but when talking about a situation that happened at work with a coworker that you wanted to change and you reported it to your boss, who's a male, and nothing was done,
Mm-hmm.
you think a woman wouldn't do anything? I'm pretty sure a woman would at least sympathize with you
Mm-hmm.
or, something to do get something done. It's such a weird dynamic. And I think it's much more than like,
It,
I think it's,
there's
uh-huh,
and there's layers. It's
so
crazy.
many layers.
It's a complicated issue because there's just so many layers. Because like you said, you
Right.
have like women, right? And you would say, okay, like women would support women, but no, like, women don't support women. Then it's like it's just this convoluted, mixed up thing. But I think it goes back to kind of how you first talked about. We have our set of beliefs, our set of morals, our set of values, and that's from our culture, that's from our upbringing, that's from our life experiences. And we are now in a place
Exactly.
in history where all of that is being challenged. And it requires for
Hmm.
you to soul search and be like, why is this bringing this up in me? Why am I having this feeling? Why? It requires the soul
Hmm.
searching because I think we're redefining our morals, our values, we're redefining life. And that
Hmm.
requires soul searching. And I think you have people that are afraid of that. And so
Hmm.
you're seeing all this speech that is like, that doesn't make any sense what you're saying.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a good, um, there's this whole all lives matter movement as well,
Yeah.
right?
Let's talk.
And Huh?
Let's talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, that was a difficult for piece for me too, because in my understanding of all lives matter, it wasn't just saying like, yeah, all cops matter, and like it's not saying that Black people don't matter. For me, at the beginning, I was like, yeah, all lives matter. That makes sense.
Mhm.
Um, I think it depends on how people um,
The language.
look at or understand what the definition is.
Mm,
Because the way that I interpret it or see it encapsulates a much larger group.
mm,
It doesn't mean, it's not,
mm.
but someone would look at that and say that person's racist because they believe all lives matter. No, I and
Mhm.
but there is there are a lot of people who in the same sense use all lives matter for that purpose. You know, there's no clear cut definition because everyone's going to interpret it differently for themselves.
And I
And unless you ask how someone interprets it, you're not going to see it, and you might be quick to categorize someone based on how how you perceive it. Um, I had a conversation with a friend of mine. She goes, "Well, if anyone tells me all lives matter, then I can tell you that they're against me."
mm,
Not necessarily, kind of going back to that whole thing that I had going in me earlier in this journey with the whole looting and rioting. In my opinion, those people's lives matter.
mm,
The people that you're affecting, their livelihood, everything that they've done to get where they are, their lives matter. I believe cops' lives matter too, but I know that there are a lot of people
mhm,
in the system who have have not been held accountable, and there needs to be a change in the system. Doesn't mean that one life is more important than the next. I think it goes down to accountability
mm,
and really recognizing or learning what people mean by all lives matter when they say it. Does that person have the intention of, um, or really behind it saying, well, Black lives are having this um, huge protest and whatever, but they're already included. No,
mm,
we're saying Black lives matter more because they're not being represented enough.
mm.
But you get what I'm saying? You're picking up what I'm putting down. I didn't know how to explain this as I thought about it prior to the podcast, but
No, so
I think it.
because language, especially being in the field of mental health and human services, language is important. What you tell yourself, what
So
you hear,
important.
language is important. And I do think that some people struggle with Black Lives Matter, All Lives Matter, because, like you're saying, there's some people, they're like, well, like, we all matter. And we do. We all
Hmm.
matter. And if you're going at it at the sense of that, yes. But I think it's turned into, and I don't know if this was always the intention of All Lives Matter, but it's
Right.
now turned into, no, I don't want to hear about your Black lives because you're included and everyone else is suffering and your suffering is just as equal. And I don't want to hear about the crimes committed about you because everyone else is equal. And
Yeah.
that is where it turns into this, um, I don't want to say hate speech, but maybe hate speech. Because
Hmm.
it's like when people are saying Black Lives Matter, or at least from my point of view, because again, like you said, I don't know if this is across the way, but Black Lives Matter is saying, I matter, so stop killing me. I matter,
Right.
so stop saying that I was only hired because of equal opportunity rights. I
Hmm.
matter. So, like, hear me when I'm talking about my racist experience, just like you're talking about your experience and you want me to hear.
Right.
So, I think language is important. And I think before we start, like, saying that this one's a racist, this one's a racist, this one's a racist, I think it's important to do like you did in that conversation and say, well, like, tell me more. Tell me more
Right.
about, so like, is this person just trying to figure out what they're saying? Or are they really like, oh, like you just don't care? And so I think
Mm-hmm.
that that's important to have these conversations, but I think that the voices and the noise from people who are just like, nope, I don't want to change. You have to keep doing what you're doing is so loud that it cuts
Mm-hmm.
through us having the conversation and really gaining knowledge and understanding.
Yeah, I agree. I agree 100%. I think there's a lot of ignorance in this world, and and I think a lot of it boils down to fear. Fear
Mm,
that's translated into anger or keeping their stance because they feel that maybe, things are changing and they're not ready for that.
and I'm
And
glad you
change
brought
can
that up.
be good.
Mhm.
And the change can be good if you're open to it. But if you feel like it's a personal attack against you, then maybe that's why people are acting out the way they are. They will never tell you that they're fearful.
Mm,
But from what it seems like, I mean, the way that I look at it,
hmm.
it may just be fear of not knowing what may happen as a result of agreeing or understanding, or why should we change to please someone else? But that is pure ignorance and that is just fear.
I'm glad you brought up that about fear and ignorance because I feel like you have people that are like legit racist, right? I feel like you have people that are ignorant, and I feel like you have people that are figuring it out, and like there's all these categories, and I feel like if people are stuck in ignorance, they can either go and be knowledgeable or go and be racist, and I hope that
Right.
you choose to get knowledge.
Hmm. Yeah. And it's hard for people to even come to the point to accept knowledge or understanding or be in that vulnerable state when they can't even separate themselves from thinking that they're right, like that they're wrong, or having a different perception or point of view. um Again, doesn't make it, I'm not saying that that is an excuse, but I think that's why a lot of people act out in the way that they do.
But I don't
I think a
that
lot of it.
mhm.
Hmm.
I don't think it's an excuse. I think you're right because like some again, I've been staying in these comments, girl, trying to understand on. And like I see a lot of people are like they're worried about losing their constitutional rights or why do we have to change? And I think that there's this fear of what does change look like? And
Yeah.
change does not mean that you lose your rights. Change does not mean that you stop being heard or that your history or that you're wrong because you're white, black, Native American, whatever. It's just acknowledging that like yeah, we have all have a history where like no, we all got the short end of the stick. America wasn't as great as we thought it to be, and like we want to make it as great as what the documents say. Like we said freedom for all, we said this for all. Yeah, but we
Mm-hmm.
always had exclusions, so let's really make it for all. And I think people are afraid of what does that look like and is that possible. And I think that we need to believe and have hope that it is possible for us all to have hope and faith and just human rights, just pure human rights is all we're asking for. We're not even asking for everyone to have a home and a mansion and all this. We're just asking for equal rights.
Right. And I think people who don't understand that think of it as a much greater thing.
Mm.
I don't think they just see it broken down to asking for human rights. I think they think of it as like feeling, I don't know, entitled,
Mm.
feeling some kind of um I don't even know how to explain it because I can't even explain it because I'm not in their shoes. But I feel like it's not just down to having equal rights for a lot of people who are like very, I hate to say this, rightist.
Mm.
Um, yeah, I think maybe they have their own thoughts on what it means or what people are looking for or what, and it's kind of sad in a way, because you can't just look at that and see like, people are just really asking for rights. Hey, like, can we get a little of that? Um,
Just a little bit.
it's
Just a little bit, right?
just a little bit. I mean, just some justice, that'd be really dope. Um, but like it's just some simple, but people have fears. People are looking at, I think there's a lot of stigma
Mm,
around the Black community,
mm.
which I hate to say as a white person, but I think there is, and there has been for a long time. And I think that makes people fearful. I think they look at one person's actions and attach it to an entire community. And
But that's
with
real. Like
Mhm,
that's real, and I'm glad like that you say that because sometimes, and I hate how and like this is as we're talking about racism. Like these are some things in racism that I'd like to stop. When people, especially Black people, are telling you that, hey, I've had this racist experience, or that I was judged, or I was this or that. Stop gaslighting people and saying, oh, that's not what really happened, or maybe you're looking at it wrong, or maybe you shouldn't have done. No, if someone, like, we wouldn't do that. Like if somebody, well, actually I take it back, we do that. Like when people are raped, right? We do. Well,
mhm,
like, what were you doing that you were in that position? Were you wearing something? Were you somewhere? Like, no, it's not their fault. If they're telling you about their negative experience, let them live in their truth and stop gaslighting them and making them feel like it's not real. That is not okay.
mhm. Yeah, yeah. Eh,
Period.
I period. Like, I have no words. That's you kind of said it all. Yeah, there, right there. Um, yeah, and I think, and this is the other thing that kind of pisses me off.
Mm-hmm.
Um, in conversations that I've had, you've had negative experience with, Black individuals where you felt like they felt entitled because they responded a different way. And yes, I don't agree with the way that they responded. I would have responded differently, but that does not make them any different than the cranky old,
Mm.
75-year-old white man who's screaming at you at a CVS counter while you're filling his prescriptions. Like,
Ooh, that's real.
know what and because I've been in that situation. It ain't cute, it ain't fun. But there's no difference in that. A person is a person because of the way that they choose to respond. You can't just automatically assume that an entire race is the same because of your interaction with one or many instances where you feel you've been attacked or hurt or not heard, or feel like someone has used their color in a way that has brought them more. It's kind of bullshit. Like, color aside, the way that a person reacts is the way that a person reacts. And you know what? Oftentimes they react wrong. I don't know if it's based on their upbringing. I don't know if it's based on their life experiences. I don't know if it's a survival method. I don't know if it is a um, a defense mechanism. That person is the way that they are based on their environment, based on the way that they were raised, they based on experiences they may have had. They may have had negative experiences in the same way with white people if they're Black. You cannot post judgment on one culture based on their skin color, based on an interaction that you had with one person or multiple. That's what it comes down to. And you need to be, and like, I feel like I'm talking like you need to. No, but like you have to be able to separate yourself and be like, that's one individual. And did they react the proper way or the way that you would have liked or hoped? maybe not, but that does not mean that you can look at an entire culture and say they're all the same, because they're not. And I don't care about your education level. I don't care about, if, and I've heard this too, that like, oh, because they're educated, they're better. No,
Yes.
it's the way that a person grows up, the way that they are taught. You can have some of the, oh, and the other thing. I mean, you can, I was just like thinking about religion, not even throwing that piece in, because you could be a very religious person, but your actions may not be Christian at all.
Girl, that is a whole other conversation. But
Yes, ma'am.
back to what you say, I feel like we put all these qualifiers, like
Yeah.
all black people are harmful unless they're educated, or all this person is this unless they, like, we got to stop putting qualifiers, and
Yeah.
like, people react based on their experiences and things like that. And like, if you have a conversation, you educate someone like, hey, like, this is really what went on. It's like, oh, okay, like, I understand where you're coming from and so on and so forth. Let me refrain and change. But I feel like, again, like, we're not doing that. I feel like, okay, we're just lumping everyone in baskets. And it's
Mm.
like, you got to get rid of the basket mentality. Like we are all different, and we're all out here trying to just survive and make it. And I feel like when we just lump everyone in baskets, I think it's because we don't really want to deal with the issues. You know what I mean? Like, I think
Mm.
a lot of what we've talked about, what you talked about, like, you're unpacking things, right? Like, you're unpacking different compartments within yourself, and that requires work.
Yeah. It's a lot of emotional work, but it makes me, I think in my professional sense, and as well as myself as a, human being, I think it opens up gateways to like understand or be more understanding and open to different people. It's not, and I appreciate that because it gives me more pathways to go down. I feel like it's allowed me to grow
Mm-hmm.
and learn more about myself that maybe I never, maybe I never would have thought about it this way, or maybe I wouldn't have had that confliction or that confusion or why. And knowing that identifying what is important to me versus what might be important to others, it's a lot of growth.
Mm-hmm. And one thing I want to also touch upon is, because I've also seen this on social media, and I've been called a racist for having like black pride, right? This
Mm.
I want to learn more about my culture and people that I didn't learn about in school and things. And so I share that on social media, or I share just different things about being black, because that's what we're going through and I'm black. Like, and
Hmm.
so I have been called a racist because, oh, you only share about black people. Well, I mean, I'm black, but I
Yeah.
do care about white people and white people things, or Asian and all of this other things, or things that just
Right.
apply to everyone. But is having this pride in one's own culture or ethnic group, whether that's Italian, African American, whatever, does that make you a racist?
I don't think so. You know what? I think there's a song, I think, what is it called? I can't remember, but there's like this show on, um, there's a puppet show or whatever. It was like on Broadway. I can't remember what it's called right now, but there's a song that everyone's a little bit racist sometimes. Um, and it really, I'll give you an example.
Okay.
Um, because you really don't know what it's hard to define what a racist is, I think, nowadays. Um, well, let me give you an example of something that happened to us recently. And it's interesting because we just thought it was funny, but we were like, huh, I wonder what.
Mhm.
So we had a situation where, and it's not really a situation. My boyfriend had texted me. He goes, oh, I met the neighbor, blah, blah, blah. I said, cool. So she's a neighbor who's living next door to us, and she wanted to ask us some questions because we have a bunch of plants. And she saw my boyfriend, watering the plants late at night, and came over to our window and like knocked on it.
Mhm.
And he came up to the window and she's like, "Oh." And mind you, this is a black woman,
Mm-hmm.
very sweet. And she goes, "Oh, you're white." He's like, "Yeah." She goes, "I thought you were a black man. I felt more comfortable." And we're like, "Well," and he was like, "How can I help you?" And she's like, "Well, I really liked her." And they had an awesome conversation. And she was, I had spoken with her not long after because she came up to my window. She goes, "I thought your husband was black." And I go, "First off, he's not my husband. And second off, no, but I heard the story." She goes, "I just felt more comfortable if I," and I was like, "Yeah, I know." It's like, but he's nothing to be scary about. Like he's a teddy bear. Um, but and it was interesting too because when I spoke with her that day, she was talking about how she's going to be moving and how she has Puerto Rican neighbors, and then started talking about all the negative things about them. And I was like, so interesting to see how a person who is black and I'm sure has experienced racism, is now going off on another culture and very stereotypically stigmatized things they'd
Mm,
hear about that culture. And it's so I don't think there's a clear definition of what racism is. I think it boils down to, I think people have, based on their experiences or their assumptions of a group of people,
mm,
it's or even like I feel like people tend to feed or create their own dialogue. Like the people that you've been interacting with,
mm-hmm.
they won't think about, what a racist, they won't see themselves as a racist. They'll see you as a racist because they feel like you're against white people.
Oh,
Uh,
so it's more like projecting. So are people
yeah.
racist because of one's own action? It's like, you know what I mean? So like I've had conversations, right? And I didn't call anyone out their name, but they
Hmm.
internalized my words as me saying that they were white supremacist or racist or this. I'm like, no, like I didn't say
Right.
I just said that your fact was wrong and here's the data, here's the link.
Yeah, and I think people interpret the way that people interpret things is how they perceive it. So I think the way that that person's perceiving it is that they're saying you're racist against white people. I've never heard you say a dang thing about me being white and you being racist towards me, but because you're trying to simply educate someone, they're thinking it as they're perceiving you to be racist because they're not educated enough, or they might, whatever it may be. It's like they create their own dialogue about someone else.
Mm. So I think again, I think it just goes back to the original conversation of looking inward and soul searching. Because
Mhm.
I think that we can all have moments where we're just a little racist.
Yeah,
I think
yeah.
that especially, I think that's especially prone when you are constantly bombarded with, this one is bad, this one is bad. And so you have to somewhat defend yourself or defend your culture. Like you have to find ways to be prideful because sometimes there's things across all cultures. I'm not just talking about one culture, across all cultures where it's like
Right.
this one is wrong and this one is wrong. So you have to have like this pride, which sometimes
Hmm.
can cross that racist barrier and you be like, listen, you was wrong because you don't look like me. And then like you soul search and you check yourself. And sometimes you soul search when you meet just good people that don't look like you. And so I just think that this concept of racism and racist and all that, we have to continue to just to talk about race and to talk about what is really going on and how people really feel. Because some people really feel how they are because of just being ignorant, not understanding what it's like to be disenfranchised or what. So I think it's just all about soul searching. It's all about soul searching and just being kind.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. I think people have so many stigmas that like it's hard for people to separate that and just be kind to a person of a different. For example, I have a client who's Italian and he's from one part of Italy versus he has a neighbor who's from another part of Italy,
Hmm.
and they hate each other.
Really?
They absolutely hate each other. You'd think being Italian unites them.
Mhm.
Absolutely not. I learned a lot that day. But it can be something as basic as being from one part of a country to a second part and having this blown up stigma because they're from a different part. And you can be racist. I mean, if racist is even the right term, against that same person, even though you belong under the same umbrella. So there's no clear cut, I think, um, definition of what race is because I believe it exists in so many different ways and
Mm,
it has so many different definitions. There's not just one clear cut definition, but also I think what it boils down to is, like you said, being kind to one another, like putting things aside, just understanding, being able to have a conversation, opening yourself up to conversation, and that's really hard for some people to do. Uh,
mm,
and that might take years. It might take soul searching, which some people don't even want to even participate with because they might think that there's nothing wrong with them. Um, Not to say that there is,
hmm.
but I think and that's where it becomes so difficult. What racism is in 2020, I
Mm.
don't think it's a solid answer, you know?
I think we have like new levels of like racism. Like there's just
Oh,
sometimes
yeah.
like old school racism. Like you're like inward racism. And then
Mm-hmm.
you have like this like, oh, like you're gonna like my Black Matters Lives post, but then you're gonna be like, oh, but no, like actually your life doesn't matter racism. There's just it's just
Right.
2020, it's just can we just throw it away? Can we just throw 2020 away and
Trash it. Put it in the trash bin.
uh,
Yeah.
funny. Just kicking our butts over here. But thank you, Margaret, for
You're
being
welcome.
vulnerable and like having the tough conversation because I think it's hard, and I think it's
Yeah.
hard because it's so sensitive. It stirs up different things because sometimes, and this is the reality, racism oftentimes can be end up in someone being abused or victimized or assaulted, and so I
Hmm.
think that's the hard part about racism. And racism is never okay, but I think we need to talk about race. And I think talking about race does not mean you are a racist. And I think we need to sometimes make that distinction.
Yeah, absolutely. I 100% agree with that.
So, Margaret, as we come to a close, is there any last things that you would like to leave us with? Any last words of wisdom?
Ooh, that's a good question. My biggest piece of advice is be willing to listen to people, open your ears, and try to understand where they're coming from.
Mm,
It doesn't matter what your own experiences are, and you don't have to accept anything and everything.
mm,
But just being able to listen to what someone's ideas, philosophies, opinions, and maybe question it sometimes. And it doesn't, not questioning it to bring someone down, but just to educate yourself further, because I think that will bring a lot more personal growth for yourself. And I think ultimately can be beneficial for your community and the world. And people don't do that enough. Um, and I think it's such an important, critical piece in understanding humans as we are, understanding their background, where they come from, why they have such strong beliefs, and what it's associated to. Um, but people just need to allow themselves to be vulnerable and listen and understand and hear what others are saying. And that's my final piece.
But I totally agree. It's like my mother always says, it doesn't cost you anything to listen. You don't have to
Yes.
agree, but listen because it might make you say, you know what, I stand firm in my belief. And it might make you say, I never thought about it from that point of view.
Mm-hmm.
And before we close, it's our last segment where I ask my guest, what are three things you're putting in your cup to get you through today? And for me, the three things I'm putting in my cup are faith, inspiration, and joy. I need faith that humanity, like we are going to like pull through and pull through better, and we're not going to use
Hmm.
these band-aid solutions like we've done over years, which has now got us to this point again. I need
Hmm.
inspiration. I want to continue to have this conversation and continue to talk about these issues that are really real, but in a way that continues to light fire in others. And I need joy because sometimes there's just a lot of pain and sadness as we talk about tough issues. So you need joy to just keep you going. So those are the three things: faith, inspiration, and joy that I'm putting in my cup to get me through. What about
Well, my first thought was coffee. Um,
you're gonna need that caffeine?
Caffeine. I think, let's see, that's a good question, Liz. One of the things, well, we'll start with love. I think passing love and expressing love in any way you can to people either just randomly meet.
Mm,
I smiling, doing something small to make an impact on someone else.
mm.
Um, I think that's a big piece. I don't know how to word that, but that'll be my number one. Um, it's hard to put it into one word.
It could be multiple. I'll allow you to have multiple.
I always try to focus on being grateful.
Mm,
Grateful for, the people that I have in my life, what I do or what I have, that brings me joy. And so I always try to reflect at night, like what am I grateful for? What can I do better?
mm.
Um, and let's see, and my third, I don't know, joy. I'm just gonna try to enjoy today. It's hard to put it three words. You did it very well, girl.
Thank
Uh,
you. Right.
um, but yeah, I think I'm just gonna try to take today and reset, and I have plans on going kayaking, so that should bring some joy to me today as well.
Well, girl, enjoy the joy of the nature. Let's add nature to your cup as well.
Ooh, I love nature. Let me tell you, the ocean does something new for me, the
Girl, me.
water, and it does something that it just rejuvenates my entire existence. Like I can have a terrible day and just bring me to like a lake, and it just puts me in a whole different mindset. So I think even though we don't really think of it as something that can have an impact, I think nature really can kind of reset
Mm.
us, whether it be spiritually or just physically, mentally, emotionally, and all
Well, Margaret, you helped me reset all of that. My chakras are aligned now.
that. Good. I'm
Margaret,
glad.
you gotta come back and have another combo with us. Thank you so much. Take
No
care and be
problem.
safe.
Thank you. You as well.